Peace everyone, Unmask here, and welcome to another new colored pencil tutorial. Today we're going to be doing some 3D water droplets. This is always a helpful skill to know how to do. You can add this to plants, you can add this to your still life, you can add it to pretty much any smooth surface just to give it that wet look. Sometimes it can add a really cool effect. So just knowing how to do this can be a lot of fun. It's also just fun to draw them on a blank piece of paper in your spare time. The reason it's a good subject matter is because you have a really good diversity of values that take place in water droplets. You have pretty much everything from black all the way to pure white with the reflections. And the most important thing in good art is having a really wide range of values, having high contrast to your image. So we're just going to draw some shapes on the paper. There's no line art for this project. And this project will remain public beyond it being an exclusive of the art club. Now, if you're new to my channel, I've had a pretty decent influx of new subscribers, so I welcome all of you. And if you're new to my channel and you're unsure of what the art club is, it is my website that I have a huge library of tutorials that I've live streamed over the years. They remain private until you sign up for the art club, but this tutorial that I'll do today will remain public so you get an idea of what I offer. You can, however, look through all of the projects that I have. I have over 100 projects and well over 1,000 hours of tutorials currently in the art club. And so you trust me, you could start today and you would not be able to finish all the projects within the next 2 years. There's that many projects and that many hours to work through. So I offer a lot over there. So I hope that you take the time to check it out. All right, so getting back to this project, I am using the Clairefontaine paint on paper. This is the neutral toned. I'm going to be using the 12 pack of Polychromos to do this project, and we're going to just finish this project today, so it'll be pretty easy. I'm going to start with the white, and I'm just going to draw some of the water drop shapes that I want. You can draw circles and ovals and also some different shapes, however you want to do it. I'm just going to start with like a light circle right in here. I'm going to keep the lines really, really light with the white. I'm going to do a drip that comes down like this, and maybe a few small ones here and here. Maybe another odd shaped one over here, kind of a kidney shape. And I have a few other examples. Let's do like an oval shape, maybe a curved oval, kind of like this. I know you probably can't see these shapes, but you want to draw them rather lightly, and then we'll start filling in where the shadows are. And maybe a few, like let's do three little circles right here. And that's going to be all of my water drops that I do today. Hey there, Diane, Claire, Victor, B, Rain, Linda, Melanie, Margaret. Good to see all of you. Yes, please give the live stream a thumbs up for me today. All right, so I am going to jump over to the walnut brown, and I'm going to first think about where my light source is. Now, if you look at references, and I have a few references in front of me, which is why I'm always looking over here, you can find different photos of water drops that have varying types of light setup. I like the sort of the dual light where you have a stronger shadow and a stronger light on one side, and then sort of a fill light on the other to give you a second highlight. So I'm going to sort of treat my water drops like that. And I think I'm going to do a light source coming down from the top right. So that means the bottom left side of all of my water drops is going to have that harder line shape. And so I'm going to trace what I've drawn here with my brown and create that shadow side of my water drop. And so around the edge of all of my water drops, I'll just sort of have kind of a brown line around the left side of the water drop. And of course, if you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to ask. I love questions and I never get enough of them, so feel free to ask away. There's no question too basic that I won't answer, so some of the most basic questions are the questions that I enjoy answering the most. By the way, when you are doing this project, just have fun with it. I would highly recommend you just doing your own random shapes of water drops. You don't have to follow exactly what I'm drawing, but if you want to, feel free to. But I do recommend just having some fun with it. You can even do unnatural water drop shapes. They don't have to be what water drops actually look like. You could do I don't know, a little star or a moon or any other various shapes. What I would recommend if you do some sort of unnatural water drop shapes, I would keep them still rounded. So if you did like a star, like the points of the star, I would sort of round those off just to make them look more like a bubble. Hey there, Elena. Good to see you. Cherry, Ulrich, good to see you as well. Chandri, good afternoon. All right, now that I have the left side established, I'm just going to put in the shadows. So I'm going to just work off of this shape and essentially give it a height. So the longer the shadow sort of makes the water droplet look taller, or it also changes whether or not the light source is coming directly from the side or from above. I'm just going to sort of work in the middle here and do something like this in terms of the shadow. And I'm just going to do a quick light layer of this walnut brown to establish where that shadow is. And this shadow the direction of this shadow should match all of the water droplets. So the shadow should all be going in the same direction with each water droplet. So just keep that in mind. This is a very, very easy project. And if you happen to come across this live stream as a recording, then just know that not all of the projects are this simple and straightforward. I do a lot of really complex projects as well. And as I mentioned, you can always check out what projects currently exist and are ongoing in the art club by checking out the website. I have the link in the description, so just keep that in mind. I have a lot of simple projects and a lot of very complex projects, but the one consistent factor among all the projects that I do is that I teach them in a way that it does not matter what your skill level is. You should be able to successfully complete any of the projects that you follow along and dedicate the necessary time to. I always tell you exactly what pencil I'm using and the technique that I'm using. All right, let's do this one here. Something like that for the shadow. The other tool that I have is I have my paper blender that I'll use to do some of the blending today. I'm not going to use any wet blending or any solvent. The paint on paper is really, really good for the dry blending method of the Polychromos. And you don't have to use this paper. However, I do strongly encourage you to use a non-white paper. That way you can utilize the white pencil for the highlights. I was going to use the Strathmore toned gray paper, but I didn't feel like digging it out of the drawer. So this paper was on top, and I was like, this paper is really good, so I'll just use this. Of course, you don't have to use the the Polychromos either. You can use whatever colored pencils. You can even use graphite and just do it monochromatically with graphite, and then use well, you can use white charcoal pencil, or you can use a white colored pencil for the highlights on the paper. All right, so that's just establishing a little bit of the shadows in these droplets. I'm going to use the black to darken just the edge. So essentially where we outlined the water droplet, I'm just going to add a little bit of black there to deepen that shadow. Very, very small amount. Depending on how dark you want the shadows to be, obviously you'll use more black. I do kind of want to go to a pure black right along the edge of the water droplet. That way I'm just maximizing that contrast and really accentuating the difference between how dark the shadows are and how bright the highlights will be. Yes, indeed. Doing a simple project like this is a nice break, since we did just finish the Thor project, which took a very long time. That was a very long project. I kind of forgot to do the shadow on these really small droplets, but I'll just blend the black out into the paper because they're really small. They're going to have a much smaller shadow. Hope everyone is having a lovely day so far. Weather is getting so much nicer. I can feel spring right around the corner. It's almost to that point where you don't need a jacket to go outside. And I think it was yesterday and the day before yesterday. It was so nice and sunny out. It's really refreshing to see just a clear blue sky again. I feel like it's just been so long since I seen a clear blue sky. I almost forgot what it looked like. We had an abnormal amount of snow this winter here too, which really accentuated the length of winter because it just felt like it was never going to end. All right, I'm going to use the blending stump now, and I'm just going to smooth out these shadows and blend it into the paper a little bit. So sort of spread that pigment out and just soften the edges and that transition between the brown and the black. This will already make the water drops start to stand off the paper a bit more just by blending this out. This technique would be exactly the same if I were using pastels or if I was using graphite. I would be blending with this same exact tool if I was using graphite actually. And also the same exact tool if I was using pastels. So you can definitely do this with pastels as well. I just want to soften that edge and bring the brown into the paper. And you can really see the difference between the shadows between these two. Do the same thing with the smaller ones also. The smaller ones are a little bit trickier because you don't want to make that shadow much bigger, but you do want to soften it a bit. That'll make it look nicer. Still cold and rainy there? Yeah, I'm sure that's the case for many people. But soon enough, summer will be upon us, and we'll be complaining about how hot it is. That's always the cycle, right? There's only 1 or 2 days you can make out in the year where there's not just people complaining about whether it's too cold or too hot. That's what my wife's coworkers do when she's when she's at work during the summer. They're always complaining that it's too hot, and then she comes home and complains that they're complaining that it's too hot because during the winter they were complaining that it was too cold and they couldn't wait for summer. And then when summer is upon us, they're complaining that it's too hot, forgetting that they've been complaining for 6 months that it's too cold because of winter. And it's just a cycle, just an endless cycle of uh, being unsatisfied with the perfect temperature. Wow, that's wild. 15 year or 16 years and you can only think of 5 days that it's been too hot. Sounds like Denmark's the place to live. I'm trying to think like where's I really liked California weather. Um, I'd been to San Diego. I over the span of 4 years, I probably spent, I don't know, maybe 3 months in San Diego, and the weather always felt the same. It was really, I never felt any super hot days, and I was there like spring fall time frame a number of times. I don't really I can't even remember how many times I've been to San Diego, LA area, but I can definitely appreciate the weather there and relate to the people that live there permanently for the sake of the weather. The one thing that always felt very consistent about San Diego was that it always seemed to rain at like between noon and 1 o'clock for 15 minutes. Like it would just rain seemingly out of nowhere for like 15 minutes and then it just go back to being perfect. All right, so there is the cast shadow for our little water droplets. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to establish the highlights. This is where things are going to really start to pop out. And this is sort of the important stage in establishing the light. So what I'm going to establish is first I'm going to use a dot to tell me where the hardest light, the more dominant light is. Now the dot has to be on the opposite side of the shadow. So for instance, I'll do this circle here first. So since the light source, we established the light source is coming from this general direction. So I'm going to create a little dot, what would be the peak height of the water droplet. So I'm going to create a little dot right here with the white. I'm going to create a little dot here. And I'm just going to go to each little water droplet and create a dot where I would perceive the highest point of the water droplet to be. And also that dot needs to be opposite the shadow and sort of pointed towards the light. So that's the key feature of the dot. And let's make this a little less than a dot, more like an oval shape, just sort of bending with the general shape of this. This one's a little less of a circle and a little oblong, simply because of the shape of the water droplet being stretched a little bit. They already almost look like water droplets just by adding the dot. You could arguably get away with just this, but let's focus on making them be a bit more realistic, shall we? Now this one here, I'm going to create the dot. Let's say this one here is a little bit different because you have to think this part that's coming like sort of drooping down, it's going to be really shallow, and then the majority of the volume of water is down here because it's sort of dragging down. So I'm actually going to put the dot down here. Just imagine that this is an oval shape, and then sort of remove the tail a little bit and just treat it like an oval. So I'm going to put the dot here because if this was an oval shape like this is where the dot would be, and that's the way that I'm going to treat it. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create the fill light. So you have two light sources. I'm going to be thinking about two light sources, the main dominant light coming from here, and then sort of a reflective light coming from the other side. And what this is going to do is it's going to lighten up this other side a little bit. So very lightly with the white, I want this to be noticeably less bright than the dot. The dot is the hard light, and this is going to be the soft light. And so I'm just going to use a little bit of white right against the shadow here, kind of like that. And I'm just going to do that on each one. This project will not take very long, but I'm going to add some color to it. So I'm not just going to leave this black, brown, and white. I think that would be kind of boring. So I'm going to add some color to this project. And like I said, all of these shadows and highlights, I'm just choosing to make them appear this way based on a collection of a few references. And what I would recommend is just find some references that you kind of like and match the style that appeals most to you. So I'm sort of combining a few references into a style that I just kind of think looks cool for water droplets. Excuse me. All right, up here. Oh, hey there, Cece. Would you use the same techniques with paint? That, yes, yeah. Obviously, paint you'd be using a brush, but you would take this same approach with paint as well. That's a good question. Because you're the idea is to create the contrast, and to do that, you would draw these same shapes with just paint. Hey there, Marcy. I don't remember if I said hello to you, but I didn't see you come into the chat. I'm going to use the blender again. I'm going to use the clean side of my blender to blend, just to smooth out this white a little bit. Try to get rid of some of the grainy texture on these larger water droplets. All right, I'm going to jump back to the black and just do another layer on the outside here, this outside edge. Really define the edge for my water droplets. Just do some cleanup. This one, the pigment tends to fade when you blend. So when you do that first initial layer and then you use the blending stump to do that blending and softening things, there's a tendency to, um, as you spread out the pigment, it fades a little bit. So the black tends to be a little less black and a bit more of a gray. Same thing with the brown. It tends to also fade quite a bit. So some additional black, some additional brown, just to really darken those shadows will go a long way. All right, now I'm going to switch back to the walnut brown, and I'm going to add some shadows into the water droplet itself. So, um, for instance, the light as it's coming through has a tendency to lighten up the opposite side. So, um, when you look at references, I have plenty of references in front of me. So again, I keep looking at this in this general direction. So the light comes through, and it has a tendency to light up the opposite side. So the slightly darker side actually ends up being where the light source is hitting. So I'm going to very, very gently add a light layer of this walnut brown to the side where the strongest light source is hitting. And I'm just going to sort of scribble this in a little bit very lightly and then use the blending stump once again to uh, blend it out and shade it. So I'm going to start with a really, really light layer. And then as I blend it out, I will go darker and darker in throughout the shadow side. Sort of think of doing it opposite the this light. And the shape is pretty the shape is pretty ambiguous, so you don't have to be concerned about you don't have to be concerned too much about the shape of it. Just sort of um, crescent around the opposing side of the shadow a bit, and you'll be good to go. These little ones are going to be a bit tougher. You may not even need to apply very much, if any, of the brown to the small ones. You can just add the shadow using the blending stump. Any questions up to this point? All right. Now I'm going to just grab the blending stump. I'm going to clean off the edge just a bit so I don't have too much excess pigment on the blending stump, because that can make it really dark right away. Having the because I did use this for blending out the black. So I'm just going to start over here very lightly. I'm just going to begin smoothing out this pigment. And even though there's like some lines and some texture, because I was so light with the pencil, it will just blend right out and you won't have those lines or anything. I just added enough of that walnut brown in order to make it noticeably darker than the paper. How large would a letter be if this was done on print? I'm not quite sure if I understand the question exactly, Victor. What do you mean a letter? Like like if water droplets were on like a letter A or a letter B or something along those lines? I'm not quite sure I understand the question exactly to give you an answer to that. Also, hello Lisa. Good to see you. So how big a letter would be if you wanted to put water droplets on it? Like if you're drawing a letter, if you're drawing a letter, I would say you probably wouldn't want it any smaller than like the palm of your hand, because then it would just get kind of difficult to get that level of detail that small. I think it would be in your best interest to have rather large letters. The paper that I'm working on is pretty big, and definitely could have I definitely could have written several things in large block letters and added water droplets to it. That's the thing about knowing how to do this, about adding water droplets, because you can add them to just about anything, and it just sort of creates a fun detail out of nothing. Because you can almost get away with, as we saw, you can almost just get away with drawing the shadow shape, adding a little bit of a cast shadow, and then a single pure white dot. And you get a pretty good looking water droplet. Adding these gradient shadows uh, on the counter side um, creates that more three-dimensional effect, but you already get pretty close to the three-dimensional effect, and the translucent effect, that's the more important uh, visual aspect of the water droplets, is sort of getting that translucent effect. So whatever's underneath, just adding like a little C shape, a cast shadow, and a white dot, you almost get all the stuff that you want to make the water droplets look like water droplets. When I said the brown and black seem to fade when using the paper blender, is that a phenomenon specific to Polychromos? No, no, that's just that's just because you're spreading the pigment out. Think of it like paint. If you take a you know put some paint on a paintbrush and you keep painting and you never add more paint to the paintbrush, eventually the brush is going to run out of paint. And if you keep trying to cover something, you're not going to, because you're spreading the paint so far to the point that it's not going to be enough paint to continue covering. And it's the same thing with colored pencils. You take this little bit of pigment and then you start spreading it around with the paper blender. Eventually, you're going to spread that pigment to the point that it's not going to do anything anymore. Like it's not going to continue to spread indefinitely. And you each time that you blend it, you're as you spread it out, you're getting less and less concentrated pigment. So that's why it has that. That's why it fades, because you're essentially just spreading it out thinner and thinner and thinner. And so you have to keep layering in order to get some uh, get some more pigment built up on the paper. That's all that it is. All right, I'm going to go back to the walnut brown, and I'm going to uh, add more depth to this shadow. I'm going to add the depth a little bit around the edge. So I'm going to accentuate the edge a little bit more. And I'm going to sort of work my way up towards the dot. So essentially, as you get further away from the pure white dot, the shadow will appear darker. So I'm just going to add a little bit more brown here, and I'm just going to do one at a time. So I'll spread this out, or blend it rather. and I'll just touch it up as I go. I'm also going to add a little bit of a shadow around the edge of the white highlight on the other side. So again, I'll just add a very small amount of the brown and then use the blender to blend it. Also, the benefit to using the Polychromos for this particular project is that you have a bit more leniency with the use of an eraser. So if you're using the Prismacolor or the Luminance or any of the heavier wax-based, waxier pencils, you're going to have less flexibility with erasing. Not to suggest that that's why you should use the Polychromos. I just think the Polychromos work really well with dry blending, whereas the waxier pencils, they don't they don't blend as smoothly with a dry blending method. I'm going to go a little bit darker. Something like that. I like the way that looks there. Yeah, that's a fun water drop. Okay, now I'm gonna do the same thing here. Gonna darken the edge just a bit more and add a little bit of a gradient that gets lighter as it moves towards the white dot there. Let's blend that out. Let's go a little bit darker. You can really apply this as slow as you want so that you don't go too dark too quickly. By the way, next week we'll start a new colored pencil project, and that will be What was the animal? What was the animal? I can't remember the animal, but it will be an animal. And I think what I might do is stylize the animal. We'll sort of do the coloring process realistically, but the proportions of the animal will not be realistic. So I'm gonna freehand the drawing of the animal and accentuate the eyes. What was the animal? Hold on a second. I have the animal right here. Let me see what that was. It was an ocelot. I think that's what it is. No. Was it ocelot? I think it was. No, it wasn't. That's like a cat. Hmm. What was it? It had oogly eyes. Oh, it's this thing. How do you even pronounce that? A tarsier? It's called a tarsier. I've never heard of that before in my life. It kind of looks like a slow loris. It sort of looks like a slow loris, but more monkey-like. It looks like a monkey meets a rat with like bat ears. It's like a bat, a monkey, and a rat all got together and was like, "Hey, let's pick out the coolest, or let's pick out the cutest features from each other and make a baby." What is it again? A tarsier? Yeah, a tarsier. Never heard of that before. But you can thank Diane um, for the reference submission because she sent me a bunch of animals, and I really liked the tarsier, and so we're gonna do that. But I like the googly eyes, so I'm going to accentuate them a bit and not make it. I'm not going to make the proportions realistic, but I am going to color it realistically. So we'll have all of the features of realism, but the eyes are going to be even more googly than they are in the reference photo, which sort of complicates the line art a bit. Oh, you know what? I forgot to do the outline here of this highlight. Let me do that really quick. Are the color charts and the Intro to Color Pencil and Pastel courses still available? Yes, they are. All of the courses are still available on my website, along with the color chart. The Actually, I think I have two color charts. I have the colored pencil conversion chart for Prismacolor Luminance and Polychromos, and then also for the pastel pencils, the Carbothello, the Caran Dash, and the Faber-Castell Pit. Just to be clear, the colored pencil chart does not have the 6 or 7 new luminance pencils because they came out last year or something like that, and I haven't used luminance pencils in so long that I don't even have them in my studio anymore. Like I don't even bother with them anymore. They're stored in my basement because all I use is a Prismacolor and the Polychromos. So I don't even use them anymore. And I don't use them not because they're not great pencils or anything. I don't use them because the price tag. It's a bit unnecessarily expensive for people that want to get into colored pencils. And the reality is you don't ever need to get them to produce professional colored pencil artwork. So there's just no need to include them into the art club projects. I'll probably never go beyond the full set of Prismacolor because the full set of Prismacolor is magnificent and the most cost effective collection of colored pencils that you can get. And the 12 pack of Polychromos. I don't think I'll ever go beyond that in the art club. Um, so, and truthfully, you don't even need the full pack of Prismacolor. You can do the 72 pack and then whatever colors don't exist in the 72 pack that I use or that I end up using in a project, you can just buy them for like $2 or something. Just buy the individual pencil. Eventually, you probably will get to the 150 set by doing that, but at the very least, you cut the initial cost. Although it will always be cheaper to buy the full set, just to be clear on that. Appreciate you guys coming by and hanging out today, by the way. I hope that you are enjoying the live stream and the demonstration here. If you are, be sure to give the live stream a thumbs up for me. This live stream, like I mentioned at the beginning, will remain public, unlike all of the other art club projects, simply due to promotional incentives. Just sort of want to keep a video out there for people coming across the new channel. And if you are a new subscriber and you're checking out the live stream, whether you're here now while it's still live or you come by and you check it out later, like many people do, welcome. And feel free to leave a comment below the video introducing yourself or whatnot. And I'll be sure to say hello to everybody that comments below after the live stream is complete. Yeah, you gotta have the open stock for pencils. Like it's it's been a pain for me in the past to find open stock Prismacolor, and I think that that's a pain for a lot of people to find where they can get open stock Prismacolor. In the past, I had to order mine from the UK, but a lot of places do ship worldwide. You just sort of have to scour the internet for a decent place that's not going to charge you an arm and a leg for shipping or whatnot. That's the only downside, really, is sometimes you'll get hung up on shipping costs, and that can make it far less practical to even use the pencils because I've been I've been stuck with not being able to find the open stock a couple times, and I have 3 full sets of the Prismacolor for that reason. I, I use pencils so much. Obviously, I go through them a lot more than the average person simply because I do this as a profession. But yeah, I have 3 sets of the 3 full sets of the Prismacolors, 2 full sets of the Carbothellos, and I don't I don't know if no I don't have 2 full sets um of the Polychromos, but I do have like 1.5 sets of the Polychromos. And on top of having 2 full sets of the Carbothello, I also have a ton of open stock as well of like black, white, a couple of the browns that I use constantly. So yeah, I have a lot of pencils. All right. So up to this point, I've only used the walnut brown, the black, and the white. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to incorporate 2 new colors. This is the burnt ochre and this is the light ultramarine. I'm going to use these to tone my water drops to just give them a splash of fun color. I'm choosing these 2 colors because this burnt ochre looks really good on this paper. I like the way that it looks on this paper, and so that's why I'm choosing this. I'm choosing the blue to sort of treat my scene here as though it's outside and it's reflecting the sky. But I promise you, you could exchange these 2 colors for any colors that you want. If you want to make your water drops purple or green, then by all means do that. I'm going to start with the ochre color, and because I'm treating the highlight as though it's sort of like the white dot here is the dominant light source coming from here, so I'm going to treat that like the sky. So everything not reflecting the sky is going to be reflecting this burnt ochre. And so I'm going to incorporate the burnt ochre on the shadow side of my water drops and not the highlight side. Instead, on the highlight side, that will be the light ultramarine, the blue. So I'm going to just sprinkle this color into the shadows, the drop shadow as well. I'm going to do it or the cast shadow. And just incorporate a little bit of fun color into the water drops so that they don't look so plain. I don't want plain looking water drops. I want them to have some color to them. And I'll also blend these colors and do as many layers as I need. But really, I'm just going to do 1 layer and then that will be it. That will be the finished product. So I'll just give this a quick smooth. And these colors don't need to be super bright. As you can see the color difference between this one and this one, where I've added the burnt ochre. And it adds just a nice little orange brown and warms up the shadows a little bit and makes it look nice. I'm going to jump over to this one, do the same thing. Just incorporate a little bit of this into the shadow. And like I said, you could totally do this with whatever color you wanted. In fact, you could even incorporate like red, purple, green, and blue into sort of a rainbow-like color and make it look like an oil or an oily water drop that has that sort of chromatic aberration that oil displays when it's that rainbow effect that you see in oil. I mean, you really could just splash whatever colors you want. And as long as they don't overpower, they're not super vibrant because you don't want to add these colors and then be like neon vibrancy because then it just won't look very natural. But just bringing them in a little bit can really make a big difference in how fun the water drops look and all of that. So be playful with it and just have fun. I mean, goodness, it's not like we're creating museum quality artwork right now, so you could arguably just pick whatever colors you want for each individual water drop and not even bother with uniformity and just experiment with different colors. Why has the white got that shape in it? Must have missed that part. Oh, you mean why does my highlight have that square kind of shape? Because I'm treating it like a sort of a fill light almost. And so imagine like a light source that has a square shape like a box light, and it's wrapping around the geometry of this glob, but it's also because it's a defined shape of a light, then it also is going to wrap around the top because it's like a square shape. I wouldn't put too much energy into thinking about it, but it's just the way that I shaped the light. There's nothing about it. There's nothing like of importance about it really. So yeah, I wouldn't put too much energy into to thinking about why I did that, but that is the reason. And as I mentioned, look, I did it because I like the way that it looks. I sort of like that effect that a box light would have as a secondary light source. But you could very easily not even have this secondary highlight in your water droplets and just go with a single light source. The single light source won't really have that shape. It also won't be that bright. So let's see. I didn't add any of the ochre here. I don't remember. So I'm just going to scribble a little bit in there and a little bit up here as well. Now I'm going to go with the blue, and I'm just going to add the blue to this shadow here. The orange and the blue, you caught me once again using my favorite complementary colors of blue and orange. I just have a tendency, maybe I even overdo it in my artwork, but I just have a tendency to incorporate complementary colors. I really like using complementary colors in my artwork. My favorite complementary colors are blue and orange. I've always really liked that complementary between the two. And honestly, I didn't even think about it. Like I didn't think about before starting this project today. I didn't think about using blue and orange for the sake of them being my favorite complementary colors. I did this completely subconsciously. There's not really a lot of space to add blue to the small ones, so I'm just going to do like a little line. Would you do the same technique for a tier? Yes, absolutely. That's actually a really good example of the use of this technique. Earlier, I mentioned like putting it on your still life. Like if you drew an apple and you wanted to make the apple look shiny and wet, then you could do it in cases like that, or grapes, any fruit. I'm just naming, I think, popular ones that are used in still life. Tabletops, foliage on leaves and things like that, just to, you could make your scenery look like it had just was freshly rained on or something. Uh, but yeah, as a tier, that also makes a lot of sense. This is definitely a teardrop, and you would approach it exactly the same. Yeah, you would approach it exactly the same. So that's a really good example. I didn't think about that earlier, but for sure a teardrop. Now I'm just about finished here, so if you've been holding off on any of your questions, don't hesitate because you got about 15 seconds left. A multicolored bubble. Yeah. Yeah, that soap used to make bubbles, they always, when it catches the light just the right way and it causes that I forget the scientific term. I think it's refraction, where the light is sort of bent and separates into the spectrum, and you get all the colors of the rainbow. You could definitely do that, but maybe a little bit more blue, just sort of. I'm gonna add just a little bit more blue on one side, just on the larger ones. Give anybody one last chance to ask their questions before I call it a day. I will be back tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to finish the portrait of the adorable Nico. We're going to finish that project, do the polishing stage. I might actually make the polishing stage of that project a public live stream as well. So um, if you want to, you can share this live stream. This live stream is shareable, unlike the art club exclusive live streams that are private. Just adding a little bit more blue in because I like this color. I think it just adds some nice character uh, to the water droplets. A portrait with happy tears. Yeah, yeah. You can add tears to anything with doing it like this, approaching it like this. Obviously, the highlight here uh, can change drastically on depending on how you want to do it. I'm just using the white to smooth it out a little bit along the edge. But there you have it. There's the water droplets. They can be any shape you want, like I said at the beginning. And this was just a fun little project, exemplifying the importance of contrast and values, uh, just to create something fun and little. So, anyways, I hope that you guys enjoy the live stream. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, share it, and I will see you all tomorrow. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Take care. Peace.